feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside. He's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, we're a couple of Chippendale dancers ready to talk about a movie that surprisingly I think will be a little bit divisive between the two of us.
That's surprising to me too, man. I'm excited to do this. We've been off for what feels like forever. It's only been a couple of weeks since Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is kind of a multiverse movie as well. But we haven't done this. I feel rusty, but I feel good because this week felt rejuvenating a little bit because I saw a couple movies that I absolutely loved. This being one of them, and another movie that we should have a review out soon. If you follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd, you probably already know what that is. It's Top Gun Maverick. But I'm excited to do this again with you. I feel like we
I
haven't
thought it was Downton
podcasted
Abbey.
yeah, no. Nevis is going to see that tonight though, so I'll get her thoughts for the next main
It's
show
for the
or something
fans.
like that. But yes, today we are reviewing Akiva Schaffer's Chippendale Rescue Rangers, which is now streaming on Disney Plus. It stars John Mulaney and Andy Samberg, as well as Will Arnett, Eric Bana, Keegan-Michael Seth Rogen, J.K. Simmons, Layne, and more. Kind of a spiritual sequel to Roger Rabbit, a little bit more of a thematic kind of similarities, and obviously the concepts and things like that, but
I mean, it even goes as far as to it's self-aware enough to know that you're going to reference that,
yeah,
so it almost tries to beat you to the punch by having Roger Rabbit
right away.
in a scene, and that's
Yeah.
not giving anything away because he's in the trailers.
Yeah.
So
So this will be
uh,
spoiler free, and I feel
yeah.
like this review will be interesting because I feel like a lot to talk about in this movie is dissecting each frame and each cameo and each character that's in the movie.
Well, a lot of it is also like pausing the film and looking at, like, the wide shots or establishing shots and seeing what characters have been integrated into a modern day setting that has
Mhm,
both humans and cartoon characters cohabitating with each other.
mhm,
So like it's kind of fun in almost like a Where's Waldo kind of way, where
absolutely.
you're like, oh, there's that character. It's like, oh, they put that character in it, and that is fun. But at the same time, I think one of my biggest problems with the movie is it's not as integrated with the plot. Like, these characters are all very extraneous for the most part.
Sure.
Like, it's just literally a blink and you'll miss it kind of cameo, where I felt that, at least with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and again, I apologize that we're going to continue to probably compare the two, but it is hard not to. um Even if it was one kind of like walk on cameo or 5 second scene, it felt like those characters had a bit of a life to them in their minimalist roles, in the way that Roger Rabbit brought in Bob Hoskins. And I think that's another big reason why the movie didn't completely work for me, because you have essentially Chip and Dale, who, as the story begins, met when they were in school in 1982 and became fast friends because they were kind of the outsiders. They were a little weird, but they complemented each other perfectly, and they became this amazing writing duo. Started working their way up in Hollywood, and did commercials and things like that, and eventually were able to land a pilot for their own show, which was Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. And obviously, that being a very popular kids show in the late 80s, early 90s, and anybody that kind of grew up in that period, or even into the mid 90s, because it was in syndication and they would repeat it a lot, know very well, the intro theme song, and that it was kind of a, take on a Scooby-Doo detective mystery each episode. And so you get to see the behind the scenes of that. And again, like, it's playing up the idea, like Roger Rabbit, where tunes and human beings coexist, and tunes can be as raunchy or as irritable or as human as
Humans.
human beings. And so part of the fallout there, after Rescue Rangers has its peak in the early 90s, is that um Chip is more of a kind of pragmatic, serious kind of guy that, you know, is still kind of considered the top banana, especially by Dale, where Dale is kind of more the goofy, fun loving kind of character.
Sidekick almost.
Yeah, he's almost a little bit like Andy Samberg's character in Palm Springs, except
Sure.
having not gone through, experiencing the same day over and over again. He'd probably be where like he was at the beginning of Palm Springs in a weird way. But the whole fallout there, or the crux of that, is that Dale wants to kind of do his own thing to kind of prove himself even more and have his own show called
Double O Dare,
Double O
baby.
Dale, which is
Oh,
really
yeah,
funny,
Dale.
which is
Why did I say Dare?
a play on 007 Bond,
Yeah,
and
sure.
things like that. So then, that kind of ruins the friendship and the show, and everything kind of goes south there. And then years later they pick up, and Dale has basically become kind of a caricature, quite literally, of his former self. He's gotten an upgrade, CGI upgrade, but also
Surgery,
he
yeah.
kind of does the Comic-Con conventions to make money and stay relevant, where Chip has gone the other way and gotten out of the industry and has become
Insurance
more
agent.
more of a kind of like 9 to 5 kind of guy. And I was thinking of you weirdly when I was watching, like, Chip leave the office and everybody's like trying to invite him to go for drinks, and it's like he's trying to separate his work
Yeah.
life and his
Yeah.
personal life,
Yeah.
right?
That was definitely me, for sure.
And then sort of the mystery part of it, or where like sort of art imitates life, where you have kind of like a modern day mystery version, is where Monterey Jack, who is voiced weirdly by Eric Bana in this instead of Jim Cummings, who Jim Cummings voiced, Monterey Jack in the series and voices a ton of other characters. Problematic voice actor, but he's still
That's maybe why, but yeah.
but he's still in the film too,
Oh,
which
right.
is interesting in all the other kind of like bit parts. Goes missing, and you learn that there's this kind of like underbelly of the
Sweet
uncanny
Pete.
valley, and Sweet Pete, voiced by Will Arnett,
Arnett.
who I think is the secret weapon in the Lonely Island canon, because you look at his performances in Hot Rod and Pop Star.
Yeah.
Like Hot Rod, he's amazing as the douchey boyfriend to Ilsa Fisher,
Oh my
who's
God,
always
in
like,
that
babe,
car.
wait,
Yeah.
babe.
Yeah.
And then
the TMZ guy in
whose
Popstar.
cup gets bigger and bigger
Yeah,
every
it's
time
so
you
funny.
see him. And even in
And-
this, like, I love like the bit with like, like his Fitbit and
Yeah.
all that, and like him sort of like becoming this bootlegger of tunes who can't pay up, and
like mutates them to make them look different, and then puts them
and
into
sells
like
them
fake,
overseas.
fake cartoon movies. So yeah,
And that's all funny,
yeah.
but I just kind of felt like sort of our entry point kind of felt a little bit weak, where like, again, you had the dynamic between Toon and Human with Bob Hoskins and Roger
Yeah.
Rabbit. Here you just have Chip and Dale, and Chip hasn't been a part of the industry for a while, but he's still a Toon and still knows the world because he is a cartoon character, where Bob Hoskins,
where you
was
kind of have
KiKi,
you have KiKi Layne in that role here, but it's not, she's kind of a third wheel, essentially, who's brought in kind of halfway through to work with them. But
I like her a lot. Like, she's really great in Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk, and like, even though I didn't love the Old Guard, she's not the problem with that movie either. But again, she feels extraneous to the plot, and like, in a weird way as well, they're doing this kind of like, and I don't know if they were intending on this in terms of the story, but like, there's this weird kind of like infatuation with Dale, kind of wanting to sort of romance the KiKi Layne character in the same way that like Michelangelo and the other Ninja Turtles do with April O'Neil.
Yeah.
And it just,
I guess
like,
maybe
it
in this
doesn't go
world
anywhere.
it's fine. You have I thought it was funny having Gadget and the Fly.
Voiced by Dennis Haysbert.
Yeah, that were together too and had like babies, which I thought was funny. I totally understand where you're coming from, and but I loved it. Like, I think it is the hardest I've laughed in a very, very, very long time. The most I've laughed in a long time. And I think I just vibed with it, as, I kind of tweeted this out. Like, the guys who made Hot Rod and Popstar made a modern Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I think it's hard to compare the two, even though they are very similar. I think they do, one was at the time just groundbreaking and really, really, I think this owes a lot to that movie, and I think is kind of a modern interpretation of it, of being, a crime story, kind of a celebration of animation from the mid 80s to now, and maybe all of animation. And I just thought it was like genuinely hilarious and creative, and on the level of maybe not so much on an emotional level, but from that meta kind of comedic level of like a Phil Lord and Chris Miller thing, like the Lego movie and Spider-Verse and kind of that kind of stuff where it's
Lego
using.
Miz.
Oh god, yeah. And we'll get into all of that. And I want to do a spoiler cast kind of because there's so much that I don't want to spoil in this review, because there are a few times where I had guttural laughter and I had to rewind or pause the movie because I was laughing so much with Nevis and had to go back and listen to what dialogue was being said, or I had to do that thing that you're saying where I had to rewind and look at something in the background or spot one of your favorite characters from something. Or And that's what I think the joy of this movie is. Like, I feel like if you vibe with the Lonely Island stuff, whether it's their music videos or Hot Rod or Pop Star or MacGruber and that kind of thing, like this is very much a movie made for someone in their early 30s. And it's
That is
not a
also
kids
important
movie.
to say, because I think that that can also be a criticism
Totally.
against it, because it is truly not a
I
reboot
love it for
for the.
that, but
I do. I like it more because of that as well, but it also doesn't make that entirely clear in the marketing. Like, it's a
no,
reboot for kids that grew up with it in the 80s and
not
90s.
for kids
It's
today.
today, and
Everything will go over their head. Every
yeah, and
single
it's not
thing.
a reboot for the series either. And I do appreciate that, because I rather take that than, a live action adaptation that kind of recycles the material
Yeah, like a
of
Alvin and the Chipmunks that they make fun of and
yeah,
stuff like that
or
too. Or
even Disney's live action
yeah,
stuff. Like, a
sure.
lot of that is just kind of like,
Take that serious
recycling.
approach.
Yeah, and then the more obvious comparisons as well to something like Cool World, or
Mhm.
the Space Jam movies, which I think
Yeah.
this is better than those, but at the
Yeah.
same time it's like it is more of a niche film than
Oh,
I was
totally. It's such an
expecting it to
inside
be,
Hollywood kind of thing too,
and a
right? Like
stoner film.
it is a stoner film and that definitely helps, I will say that. But I just felt like it was the most inside baseball, kind of inside Hollywood kind of thing, where I feel like, me and you and people who really love movies and the industry and animation and stuff like that will, I think, get a lot of it. But there's so many little things there where I'm like, this is going to go over so many people's heads, and maybe they'll see characters that they like and they'll laugh at some of the silly comedy and stuff like that. But why I loved it is because it was so niche and that it was so specific to being like this meta narrative. And I love the idea that, again, and which Roger Rabbit did too, of the Toons living there and that they're just actors and in these shows and they're not actually those characters, even though they kind of are those characters, which they poke fun at as well. I think any criticisms I have is like it's a very simple crime story, and the kind of emotional kind of beats of between Chip and Dale and their friendship I think work, but they never are on a level of like the top tier kind of like animated films and some of the Phil Lord and Chris Miller stuff that I'm talking about, and Pixar and even what Sony's been doing lately. Like, and I don't think this movie was trying to do that, although it is trying to kind of have that emotional hook between Chip and Dale.
I think it's trying to be
um
smarter than it is, though. Like, that's the other thing that I did struggle with a little bit. And this isn't written by the Lonely Island guys. This is written
no,
by
yeah,
the writers of Doolittle, the Robert Downey Jr. film.
yeah.
And I do feel like it's overthinking, sort of like, okay, how many kind of clever inside jokes and references and things, and you can see it. Like, it's just trying too hard, I think, at times, to be clever. Where, again, it was weird watching this and then watching the Bob's Burgers movie, which I have less of an affinity for, but it also is very much like based on like play and sort of visual puns and things like that. And it's not a great movie per se, but it is charming because it almost felt effortless, and like it was just natural to its being, that's how it kind of presented itself, and how these characters in this world kind of were already built based on 12 seasons in a show that was originally about cannibals, or supposed to be about cannibals, kind of did its own thing
It
where it
was?
does. Yeah, so that was the original pitch. Bob's Burgers was supposed to be about
Like,
cannibals, and
and
then
they
they
like sold
reworked.
human burgers? Is that what it
Yeah, and then they basically retooled it just to be like a sitcom show.
I had no
um
idea. Wow.
it is, yeah, it is bizarre. Um but with this, it does feel like, okay, we're in a moment of time where, you mentioned the Phil Lord Chris Miller thing, where it's like, okay, everything that's kind of like meta, that's borrowing from 80s and 90s cartoons, is playing in that realm and having to either up it or be on that level. And it tries so hard to do it, that you can see all the little sort of jokes and mechanics in it, where I think like the best bits are like, their voices. Like, I actually really liked that, like, their on-screen voices, that those high-pitched kind of chipmunk voices are
Mhm.
just, them acting in the way that,
Yeah.
like, some comedians, like, the late Gilbert Godfrey, didn't actually sound like that in real life, the way that, like, he would, like, shout and sound obnoxious. Like, he has an
Yes. Yeah.
actual normal voice, but when he goes on stage to do his bits, that's his persona that he's created. And that's the same thing with Chip and Dale, where it's in there, but it's not necessarily, them 24/7.
No, like I mentioned, I love that. I totally, I get what you're saying. That didn't bother me at all, and I kind of loved it for that reason of almost throwing everything in the kitchen sink in the movie and being almost like overly written to the point where I thought it was clever, and I thought the jokes did land more times than not. I thought the references were genuinely clever and funny throughout, whether it was something that was in the background that you would want to read a title of, or if it was something more in your face, whether it was a cameo or just a bit part. And I just, I had such a blast just watching it with Nevis and going, oh my God, I can't believe they got away with that, or I can't believe they put that in here. And just the way that I'm so shocked that Disney was okay with this movie, and that is a weird thing. Like them letting them poke fun at themselves is something I didn't expect them to do right now or
To a
anything like that.
certain degree, I still
Yeah,
think that there are things that are off limits. Like,
totally.
Disney will never be okay with anybody, especially within like making a Disney film, referencing Song of the South and saying like how fucked up that
Yeah.
movie
Like
is.
if there was a Song of the South joke in this, that would have been in wild. But there are some things though of using legacy characters in ways that I just, whether it's Sweet Pete, like I don't want to go into his full backstory, but like just the way that that plays out
You mean
and
Flying
lends,
Bedroom Boy?
yeah. Yeah, and how, they play with those original Disney classic movies. Little Mermaid's another one where they use flounder in a way that
I have this
I
fork.
was like I
Who's voiced
couldn't,
by Rachel Bloom, because
I
the guys who wrote this as well have worked on that ex-girlfriend show.
Okay, yeah, Crazy
Yeah.
Ex-Girlfriend or
Crazy
something. Yeah,
Ex-Girlfriend,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And there are just so many times like that where I was just like, I can't, did they, who at Disney was like, yeah, you can do that. And
Well, also just licensing, because there are
and
other
there's,
characters
that's
that
a
are
wild thing
outside of the
too. Yeah.
Disney stuff as well, that I
You
guess,
have
I mean,
characters from DreamWorks, from Warner Brothers, from
Paramount.
Paramount, from like there is a cameo that I'm so glad they did not give away, that, and I don't
I'm
know if
sure
they
people
have,
are
and
well,
like,
online now it is. I'm
oh,
I'm, I'm
totally.
sure,
Yeah, I
like
haven't
within the
gone on
last,
Twitter, but yeah.
and that's something I would like to talk about more
Yes.
in the
In
spoilers, and
yeah.
especially just like what it represents and what like it's represented in some,
We had
maybe
a
the more
conversation about it, and I understand where you're coming
problematic
from.
nature. But the other thing I will say that I did like about this movie, but I do wish it was, I wish the film was more depressing. I
Okay.
know that sounds weird to say, but I think what works here really well, or is quite relatable, um, is the idea of feeling completely and utterly obsolete and insecure, and like you have nothing left to give the world, and that you've just kind of, you're facing the void of oblivion. And
Mhm.
you know um I think Dale feels that more than Chip, and like he's like hanging on to this little piece of pop culture that, at a time he was the biggest star in the world, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and now he kind of is, circling that void, and having to kind of like face, the next stage of his life. And it's the same thing with even Sweet Pete, where it's like, you're cast aside for something else, and you're irrelevant, and you just kind of feel insecure about that, and like I almost wish that they went a little bit further
Further.
with that, because like I feel like that is touching on something kind of interesting,
Like if you're gonna make
especially
this movie for old, like it's for, an adult audience for the most part. Like it's not
yeah,
R-rated by any means, but you could have touched on some of those themes a little bit deeper. And I think that's my biggest criticism too, dude, is like the plot and the emotional beats and the message and things like that is pretty thin. It's
yeah.
pretty like it's a comedy through and through. It's a meta comedy with, yeah, sure, it's making some commentary on Hollywood and animation and I love all
The
the different
Uncanny
styles.
Valley. I
Oh
thought
my
of you
god,
with the
yeah.
cats bit.
Oh my god, it's great, dude. Like even just calling it like, oh, we're in the valley, the uncanny
Uncanny
valley,
Valley.
and even referencing like basically a Polar Express by name, even though that's like, you already had Roger Rabbit earlier in the movie, but then poking fun at other Robert Zemeckis animation styles, and that's the kind of stuff like that I felt like was inside baseball, or people who really love animation and things like that, like the different styles that they go through and the different characters that interact with each other, whether someone's claymation, someone's CGI, someone's hand drawn, someone's like
A
all the
Muppet.
different a Muppet, like oh my god, it's great. And like that all weirdly worked together for me and never felt weird. And there's even sequences where they flip through a bunch of different animation styles for Chip and Dale, and you see things that they couldn't maybe throw in those characters, but you see Rick and Morty style and all this different kind of stuff that I'm just like surprised that they went through. And but yeah, going back to what you were just saying, like yeah, if I'm gonna give the movie like a really really great score. I'm not saying it's perfect, but for me it was like it's a matte movie through and through. Like
Yeah.
where you're using franchises and references that I love, and it's very funny, and it's that kind of stupid smart comedy that I really really like, and that's why I think I vibe with guys like The Lonely Island and Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and like where it can still be very dumb and it can be very silly, but like is also got that level of cleverness, whether it could be overwritten at times or overthought, but like it's still for me just kind of lands when you can take characters and poke fun at yourself and kind of do this very inside Hollywood kind of thing. And I just completely vibed with it. And like also shocked that they got, yeah, characters from like R-rated franchises in it. Like there's one character I'm like, I can't believe that character is in a Disney movie. Where I'm like, and there's a couple other ones like that are from R-rated movies that aren't even huge spoiler. Like the one that I'm thinking of is just from a show that I really love and is a character that is probably my favorite character from that show. And just seeing him sitting in a Russian bathhouse is
Oh, yeah.
was just like really funny to me, where I'm like, I can't believe that character is in something on Disney Plus that's a Disney quote unquote kids movie. And
Or that
like
that
is
that that the people, the creators of that show that you're talking about,
yeah.
because I'm sure that they do have control over
Oh,
it, would
totally.
sign off on that.
But they
So
probably know those guys and probably knew what they were doing in this
yeah,
movie and kind of was like, "Oh, we love what you guys are poking fun at and what you're doing." And like
and you're gonna pay us a ton of money,
oh,
so
totally. I can't believe like I don't know the licensing. I would just love to talk to the person who was in charge of getting the rights to all the characters in these movies, cuz like that would be a fascinating conversation. And I know that's kind of what we're going back to, but that's what this
and we
movie's
talked about this a
like.
lot with even the Wreck-It Ralph films, where it's almost like it's kind of like, oh well, wow, they got this or that,
Yeah,
and they were able to, like, go to Nintendo for the
sure.
second time around and
Yeah.
bring more of those characters in, because Nintendo's very safeguarded
There's
when
a
it comes to that
Nintendo
stuff.
kind of thing in this one too, a couple of them. So like it's just yeah, there's some franchises that are used here that I'm just surprised that. And I don't know if it's like that parody kind of law where if you're poking fun at something, you're allowed to use it, but like some of it is obviously clearly licensed. A lot of it's Disney properties and things like that too, but um yeah, I had a blast with it. I it's something that I immediately want to watch again. I think it's perfect in that, Lonely Island filmography of just silly kind of comedies that I think will grow on people over time. Um, and I think it would make like a great, obviously, double bill with Roger Rabbit. I think it would make a fantastic double bill with the Lego movie, or even Wreck It Ralph, like you're referencing, and things like that. But this is a,
Again,
some
not for kids though. Like if you
no,
want to
that's
do
what I
like a
mean.
double
Just
bill
for
for children, like the
yeah,
Lego movie is a little bit more suitable in terms
totally.
of like being mature but still
I don't think a
You're
kid
used.
would really enjoy this if you're a young kid. Like, I don't.
I mean,
There's
some of I think just some of the designs
yeah,
will entice them, and the colors,
but the
but in
whole movie
terms
will
of
go
like
over their
the
head,
story,
and
yeah, the
like and the
story, they won't
jokes
know what's
even
going on.
like there's some slapsticky jokes, but like not. It's a lot of just you either have to get the reference or know something about Hollywood or something like that. And like even the background jokes that I keep pointing out to you and we're texting back and forth of, whether it was a movie poster or a
Yeah,
movie that they
again, the play
reference,
on
like
words, the puns, like those are for adults, and usually there are a lot. I mean, most kids' movies do have that
have those, but this is
because
all of that.
yeah, and then again, like it's not R rated, but it does kind of like sort of crest that line of
Yeah,
being like, okay, like it's not profane in that kind of like, again, like it does have a sleaziness, but it's subdued to a certain degree.
sure.
And I think, again, like I gotta go back to Hot Rod, you mentioned MacGruber, Pop Star. Those are all movies that I didn't really love the first time around, and I still don't necessarily love those movies, but there are scenes within those films that over time I've kind of grown to love. Like I do love every scene with Will Arnett, at the TMZ, sort of
Yeah.
office with, every time they cut to him, he's got the bigger cup and he's sucking out of it. And like those moments take time to really kind of build. And I wonder, like with this, what will kind of stick out, because watching this, there was never really that kind of moment where it was kind of like, oh, that's really kind of like a perfect, like Lonely Island, weird kind of out of left field kind of scene. Like, yeah, again, like just thinking of that stuff. And one person we haven't really talked about who I don't think works in it, is just too distracting, is Seth Rogen as one of the henchmen
Okay.
for Sweet Pete. I think that Seth Rogen's too big of a name for that
And
role.
to
It
use
just kind
his
of,
face in it as well, because he's the one that kind of only he looks like him a little bit, right? Where
yeah,
everyone
like the
else
main
is,
payoff for him comes later
yeah,
at the
with
comic
other
convention.
characters that he has played throughout
Yes.
animation.
And
Yeah.
and I get why that's probably ultimately why, and he's probably also friends with those guys as well. And I like Seth Rogen, but it just feels like that role, it's not necessary to have that big of a star
I
in
would have
that
liked
role.
someone weirder maybe in that role, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like you had Tim Robinson, who I love,
Who I
and
swear sounded like Jason Sudeikis
a little bit, yeah.
when
And I
because I
again,
thought
I'm
that's
not
who it
going to talk
was.
about what character he's playing, but like he is one of those guys that yeah, I love the character that he's playing in this. But yeah, anyways, I agree with you. I love Seth Rogen. I think the payoff, it's not super worth it. Like the joke isn't funny enough to get to that point. Like I get what they're doing, but
Like
I'm
I think
kind of with you on
Keegan-Michael
that.
Key's cameo works better because it is literally just like a cameo, and it is out of all the supporting characters that they run into, I actually kind of liked
Oh
him
yeah.
the best, like
It's great.
especially
I'm
when it's
surprised they
like,
didn't use
"Are you
actual
guys cops?"
Muppets, and maybe that's a Muppet,
Yeah,
like
maybe it's a Jim Henson thing,
Jim.
but
Yeah,
and again, another movie that I think kind of is in that canon is like the Happy Time Murder. So maybe
yeah,
after that experience of that film doing so poorly,
yeah.
they were maybe even more kind of like hesitant to do anything that was similar.
Because obviously that character is Swedish Chef, right? But like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like,
Or maybe that is the point, that it's
yeah.
like you're doing a knockoff version of
Sure,
Swedish Chef.
because
But
it's
I do
supposed to be
like
in this
that.
shady. It's
Yeah,
anyways.
when
The
he
character
breaks
he's playing is
character,
Bjornson the
"You
cheesemonger.
guys cops."
Yeah, it's good, dude. And like those are those moments that like I understand that it's not going to be for everyone, and comedy is like that too. Is where um I've always said this, where it's just like everyone has a different sense of humor. So I feel like comedy is the hardest movie to put like a 5-star rating on, or like review of objectively, because
Yeah.
I feel like sure you can point at the filmmaking, and as long as a comedy is competently made, like you really are going to lean into, was it funny, did it make me laugh, and like
Yeah.
you can break down, does it have good emotional beats, does it have like a good
Does it have
story and things like
characters
that,
you like?
yeah.
Does yeah, like
But
all that stuff
ultimately, it's
is,
like, did it make you laugh, and how hard did it make you laugh? And
yeah.
everyone's going to think different things are funny, right? Someone's not going to think a fart joke is funny. Someone's going to think a fart joke is the funniest thing in the world. Meta humor is going to be annoying to someone. It's going to be definitely someone's jam. Like there's so many different things that people laugh
It
at
might
that
even
like
be someone's Space Jam.
yeah, like this is, oh my god, like so much better than Space Jam and New Legacy, which is trying to kind of
It's
do
better than the first Space Jam as well.
yes, absolutely. absolutely. It's better than both of them. And this is doing not the exact same thing, obviously, but A New Legacy really tried to do what this is doing with bringing in so many different franchises and cameos and things like that. And I think it was so much more satisfying in this movie than it was in A New Legacy, where A New Legacy felt kind of gross of just like, let's throw everything in here and not really have a point to it. And I think there are some characters in here that are just purely for that moment that you were talking about, Eric, where you're like, blink and you miss it. There's a person in the background and you go, oh shit, there's that person. And there's probably dozens, if not like 100 of those characters in this movie. But like, I feel like the characters that they did pick and choose to use, I liked how they used them, those Disney characters, especially like a Sweet Pete or a Flounder or
I mean, my
a
favorite character doesn't
Lumiere
even
and
show up until like the credits, basically.
oh yeah, okay, yeah, I loved that reference too because that was a show that I loved as a kid.
Yeah.
And
Who's also voiced by Jim Cummings.
yeah.
So.
So, and then that's the kind of, I think, what people will have fun with this movie. And like the comedy will either land or not. But I feel like whether you're a Chip and Dale fan or just a fan of animation, you're going to find a lot of stuff that you love. Anyways, I know, Eric, you got to bounce. So let's wrap this up. I'm giving the movie 5 stars. It's the only, it's second.
Jesus.
It's the
Next to
second.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Dude, it was, I could never, like, again, very different movies, and I think I love them both for very different reasons. One is a great film, one is a movie that I just thought was really funny and clever and has a lot of characters I loved and things like that. But I saw Top Gun Maverick and this week, which rejuvenated my life back into it wasn't that it went anywhere, but like those two movies I really loved and I saw them back to back and for very different reasons again, but both of them I'm like, god damn, these are two movies I had a blast with. And
I mean, you're playing with the boys, you know.
yeah, and I'm gonna give it 5 stars. Not a perfect movie, like I said, it could have probably,
but it's a movie that
like,
worked for you. Like that's the
completely,
thing.
yeah.
Like, or like, again, I'm giving this movie 3 out of 5, but at the same time it's like I'm not above this material either, because like that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film that came out, and I still watch it now. I mean, part of it is obviously nostalgia, and that's another thing that factors into this movie as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first film from the 90s, 5-star film.
Oh, totally. I'm with
It's
you.
not a 5-star movie,
No,
really,
no.
but like for me it is. So I totally get, you know, where you're coming from. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just think it's one of those things like on Peacemaker, it's a grower, not a shower. It's literally a chode.
I get God, it's better than that. All right, guys. Thank you all for listening or watching. We're glad to be back, just like Chip and Dale, even though we were only gone for like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
It'll be a little bit weird over the next month or two.
Matt, you're getting married. Don't
I know,
apologize for this or
but
explain yourself.
we're still gonna figure out what we're gonna do.
We've got some exciting stuff, I think,
we
coming
do.
up.
We have a lot of cool stuff before I go to Europe for my wedding. So if anyone's listening or watching, I'm getting married in Croatia in June. So I'll be gone the majority of June, coming back in July. We still have some great reviews that are coming up over the next couple weeks for some big movies. We'll have some main shows where we're behind. We got to talk about Avatar. We got to talk about Jake Sully is back. We got to talk about, I watched all 3 Lord of the Rings movies finally. We got to talk about that
At Cinesphere.
So, like, at Cinesphere. So those will be on the main show, and we'll kind of have reviews for Top Gun Maverick. Men, I'm hoping to see, so we'll have a review for that. And Lightyear, Jurassic World, all of those, Dominion, we should have those out before I go, and then we'll figure out what's gonna happen during those 3 weeks while I'm gone, whether Eric puts up solo reviews or has guest spots, or we're just quiet for 3 weeks. We'll figure it out. Or maybe we'll
Quiet Place 3.
We'll pre-record a whole bunch of episodes.
I mean, we should reveal it now. We're trying to get Anson Mount on the show.
I would love that. He just co-hosts. He's got nothing else going on. No, he's in that Star Trek show. He's actually doing fine. So good for him. We want to do a Doctor Strange spoiler cast still, so all of that should be coming soon. We were just a little bit behind on stuff due to a plethora of different reasons for Eric
Life
and myself.
finds a way.
It does. Thank you again. If you want all of the stuff we do, just head over to Letterboxd at Untitled_movies. Everything should be over there for you. And as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com and on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews, including an interview with Top Gun Maverick co-stars Jay Ellis and
Hell
Danny
yeah.
Ramirez on RogersTV.com/cinemascene and on all the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Chip and Dale.
That Post Malone song's a
Rescue
slap.
Rangers. I still like the original one better.
Well, yeah, of course. Bye, everybody.